King's Dominion is an amusement park located in Doswell, Virginia, just north of Richmond. They're home to 13 roller coasters, a ton of family attractions, a built-in water park. The place opened back in 1975, though a preview opened in 74 as Lion Country Safari, which was this drive-through. Obviously, that's no longer around, but this park has had a really cool history. I know many of you will be familiar with Kings Island. Think of this park as the spin-off. They feature a lot of similarities, most notably International Street and the Eiffel Tower. They also have several identical rides. For a while, it was operated by Paramount, had a lot of notable themes including the Italian Job and Outer Limits, but they've changed a lot since then. This is my home park. I've gone here more than any other park in the world. I've seen how much this place has evolved, and even within the past 5 years, so much has changed. So I hope that I can offer an interesting perspective so you can see how much the park has improved, what they do well, what they could be doing better, walk through the different areas of the park, and also give tips for how you can have the best experience possible. First, when should you go? Kings Dominion's operating season is from March through December. A couple years ago, they introduced Winterfest so the park could be open during Christmas time. It's a fabulous event, and I'll kind of get into the special events section a little bit later. But I love how long the operating season is. And while there is a lot to do, for the most part, I do think that if you're visiting from out of town, you can knock everything out in one day. As long as you try and avoid peak season crowds, like Saturdays during the summer, or those really busy haunt days, you should be fine. The lines typically are very manageable. And if you do need something to pass the time, I recommend Disney Emoji Blitz and want to thank them for sponsoring this video. You can go ahead and download the game for free using the link below on your mobile device or tablet. Disney Emoji Blitz is unlike any other Match 3 game on the market. Each emoji has its own unique power-up, and you can control what to use. It offers a strong layer of strategy to each game you play. My favorite emoji, personally, is Ahsoka, because I'm a big Star Wars guy, and the Clone Wars is the best, but shout out to Mandalorian, he's cool too. But in addition to Star Wars, they have a huge collection of Disney and Pixar and new characters added every single week and month. So there's tons to choose from, including different categories such as Silver, Gold, and Rainbow exclusive. And then you have story and villain emojis. And emojis you earn in the game, you can send to friends and use in your text conversations. So it's an awesome way to make yourself feel cooler than the rest of your friends because you have something that they do not. And exclusively for this video, if you download using my link on the screen and in the description box and pinned comment, 3 random players will receive the following emojis: Meg, Aurora, Cinderella, and Tiana. And there's a link in the Google form with full details in the description box. And in addition, the link also acts as a creator code, so anything you spend in the game also helps support me and the channel. Now back to Kings Dominion. As I was talking about with crowds, something you will see with the park is occasionally they will be operating some attractions with one train. That is a big notable difference between Kings Dominion and Kings Island. You would never see that there. But Kings Dominion doesn't quite get the crowd levels like Kings Island does, and you can also see that in the investment that this park receives. They don't receive a new roller coaster as often as that park does. But that doesn't mean that they haven't had good stretches of amazing thrill rides. At the moment, they have 13 operating roller coasters. They've had a total of 19 coasters throughout their history. The most recent coaster was this year in 2022 with Toombeely, a 4D free spin. You can also find awesome rides here like Twisted Timbers and I-305, which is one of the most incredible 1-2 punches of any park in the world. So as much as at the end of the day, I do think I prefer Kings Island overall, Kings Island's top 2 does not touch what Kings Dominion has with an Intamin Giga and an RMC hybrid. There's only a couple parks in the world that can say they have a Giga and an RMC, the others being Cedar Point and Nagashima Spa Land, so I'm thrilled that my home park is one of them. It has been interesting to see how their coaster collection has evolved over the past couple of years. The last coaster to close was Volcano. This was probably one of the most unique attractions in the world, and I was very devastated when I found out it was closing. I've definitely come to terms with it. I've made peace about the situation. It was a maintenance nightmare, but it was the most popular coaster in the park during the 20 years that it was operating. And that mountain had a lot of significance. Back in the day, it was known as the Lost World, and there were a variety of attractions in there, such as the Haunted River. And back in the late 90s, the park decided to turn that into a roller coaster. Kings Dominion definitely hasn't been the same since then, but the good news is that I know that they'll put in a great replacement at some point, as they've done with other rides in the past. Hurler was of course converted to an RMC. Shockwave was a Togo stand-up coaster that they took out in 2015. I would have loved to see a coaster put in that spot. Instead, we got a Frisbee, which is fine. I just think they could have done more with that space. At the one time, they also had a very unique prototype SNS launch coaster called Hypersonic XLC. It has a sister coaster in Japan called Dododampa, which was cool to experience because unfortunately I never got on hypersonic. And sometimes it blows my mind that we've seen cool rides such as that close, and yet Anaconda is still here. That's the one roller coaster that they could close it tomorrow and I would throw a party. But enough about the coasters, let's talk about the different areas in the park. Now I want to start with the front entry experience. After you pass through the front gate, you're greeted with International Street. And this is probably the most picturesque area in the park. And what makes it so fun is that it is very detailed, but it's also secluded. There are so many massive trees in the center on either side of the fountains that it gives a very different feel than how Kings Island's International Street is, where it's very wide open. But I think this is such a cute and charming area and a perfect way to start your entry experience into the park. During some of their events like Grand Carnival, when they have a bunch of booths set up, you could really spend hours just on International Street hanging out. I can also appreciate the music that they play here. It always feels very grand and welcoming. Sometimes it's soundtracks from different popular movies, and it absolutely gets you in the mood and ready for your day in the park. So right at the end of I Street, you have the Eiffel Tower, which is 1/3 replica of the actual Eiffel Tower in Paris. Gives a fantastic view of the park, highly recommend it. But from that point, you can really go right or left. Right will take you into Old Virginia, left will take you into Planet Snoopy. So we'll go right into Old Virginia and go counterclockwise around the park. If you thought International Street was wooded, Old Virginia really takes that to the next level. There's not a ton of attractions here. You have Shenandoah Lumber Company, which is the log flume, Whitewater Canyon, which is your rapids. Both of them are off in their own little area, so when you're actually on that attraction, you don't really see much else of the park. You also have a couple places to eat and drink, like Dogwood Grill and the Parched Pig, which is this nice bar. There's some carnival games, the King's Dominion Theater, where they occasionally do shows, a classic antique car ride, a pair of flying scooters, which are super fun. I have a soft spot for those. And then you can enter the Grizzly Gulch gift shop, which you have to pass through to get to Grizzly. And I gotta commend the park. I mean, while it is certainly not ideal to enter a gift shop to get to a ride, they have done a lot better of a job recently with signage so people know where to go, because Grizzly is very hidden from everything else. That a lot of people just completely miss this ride, and for that reason it rarely ever has a line. Many people don't even know it's there, especially since from several other vantage points in the park you can't even see it. But that gift shop is looking a lot better, especially since after Dinosaurs Alive closed, they made this area a lot more themed. There's also some go-karts back there, which from what I've seen have never been very popular, so I imagine at some point we'll probably see those go, and maybe you could even fit another roller coaster there next to Grizzly, using some of that land and the space that was occupied by Dinosaurs Alive. Or maybe that's just wishful thinking. I love this covered area just outside of that gift shop that can lead you towards Candy Apple Grove. It's perfect during the summer when it's super hot and they'll have some misters going, and during Halloween they'll illuminate it with fog and put a bunch of monsters in there, and it's super cool. And from there, that leads you into Candy Apple Grove, and this is probably the biggest area of the park. It's this giant midway that stretches from one end to the other, and you know you're there when you see these giant candy apples scattered throughout. It is super cute and charming. Coney Mall could never. You can spend a lot of time just walking around and taking in the atmosphere. They do a great job with landscaping here. I love this floral clock that they have right there. The best place to see that is if you were to walk from the Eiffel Tower straight back. There's this heavily wooded pathway where the trees are just so tall above you. It's almost this really cool like optical illusion, especially when you're facing the other way walking towards the Eiffel Tower. You just feel so small on that pathway. It's really cool. But right as you enter Candy Apple Grove, you have your classic carousel. There's Delirium, like I was talking about earlier. Of course, Twisted Timbers, the fabulous RMC. Apple Zapple used to be known as Ricochet. That's a Wild Mouse. Good family coaster, looking a lot better since they rethemed it. They also have a classic racing wooden coaster called Racer 75. Used to be known as Rebel Yell. Unfortunately, these days, it doesn't seem to race as much as I wish it did. I think it's also a shame because back in the day, it felt like it gave more airtime than it does now. So this is definitely one of those attractions I would love to see get a refresh, especially since after they retracked the first drop, they didn't paint the wood white, so it didn't match. It just looks off where you have most of the structure white and then just the first drop is brown. Ever since they did that, it has not looked good at all. If you'll be eating in this section, Country Kitchen is an awesome option if you're looking for some classic Southern cooking. Mac Bowl is a gourmet mac and cheese bar. You can also find a Subway here, although it seems like these days that place isn't open as often as it could be. That's right next to the Drop Tower, which is one of my favorite attractions in the park. I think it's one of the scariest drop towers out there because it breaks so low to the ground, and this thing is so freakishly tall. It's one of the only Intamin gyro drop towers out there. It gives an incredible view and a really forceful, scary drop. And I couldn't talk about Candy Apple Grove without shouting out one of my favorite things in the park, and that's the singing mushrooms. This was something that Kings Dominion brought back for their 40th anniversary. They used to exist back in the day when the park had a sky ride. They sat right next to it, and they'd sing songs, kind of like a barbershop quartet. There's a frog smoking a cigar. He's got a little hat on his head, and he's playing the piano, but it's actually a log. And it's so cool and quirky. It just makes me smile every time I see him. I literally own more singing mushroom merchandise than I care to admit. So we've reached the far end of Candy Apple Grove. Let's head into Jungle Expedition. And I actually have a couple videos on the channel talking about Jungle Expedition because it's the newly rethemed area. Long story short, they had a section called Safari Village that definitely needed some love, and the area is just looking incredible. It is the new gold standard for a themed area at a Cedar Fair park, and I think a lot of parks could take hints from what Kings Dominion did here. It is almost unrecognizable. They've made so many changes. Even though they still haven't filled the volcano gap yet, they put in Tumbili as a cool replacement for the crypt, rethemed their bobsled Avalanche to Reptilian. That's looking awesome. They also redid one of their restaurants that's now serving some really good food, such as prime rib. So yeah, this area is fantastic. Now what's interesting is, after you get past the main rethemed section of Jungle Expedition, you have the part of the park that is left over from Safari Village that still doesn't really fit. It's not really part of Jungle Expedition. It's kind of its own thing. That's where you have Backlot Stunt Coaster, Anaconda, Flight of Fear, and Intimidator 305. It's a weird mishmash of everything. Definitely no theme here. Backlot is a Premier Rides family coaster. It's a clone of the one at Kings Island and Canada's Wonderland. Anaconda is a classic aero looper. It sits over Lake Charles, which was this ginormous lake that used to be at the park. It shrunk significantly ever since they added the water park, which I'll talk about in a bit. But now it's just here sitting directly underneath the coaster. Flight of Fear is another one that you can also find at Kings Island. Then of course right next to it, Intimidator 305, themed to Dale Earnhardt and NASCAR racing, is so cool. I love that it has its own designated plaza. What's interesting is a lot of coaster enthusiasts will run straight here because they think, oh, it's the biggest, baddest coaster in the park. It's going to get the longest line, which is actually not true. A lot of the public is scared of this thing because it has a reputation of causing people to black out or gray out. So it's definitely not for everyone. I love this thing though. It would be cool to see this section of the park though get a refresh. Doesn't necessarily have to tie in with Jungle Expedition. It could be its own thing. My biggest request would be adding a bathroom back by Flight of Fear and Intimidator 5. You could put it right here. There's a perfect spot for it. That's the one main thing that this area is missing, because if you're at Intimidator 5 and you gotta go all the way back to the entrance of Jungle Expedition, which is a pain. Last area in the dry park is Planet Snoopy. This is actually the largest Planet Snoopy area at a Cedar Fair park. They have a ton of rides there, perfect for kids. This includes 2 roller coasters, Woodstock Express and the Great Pumpkin Coaster. And hidden back there is also the park's only dark ride, Boo Blasters, which I highly recommend. I just wish it were in a better location because I think so many people have no idea this thing even exists, but it's so fun. It's my favorite Boo Blasters in the Cedar Fair chain. But I think this area is super cute. So last section I'll talk about is the water park. And this is a weird one. This is a bizarre water park. And that's because it's pretty much split in half, cut down the middle from Racer 75. When you enter Soak City next to Drop Zone, there's not a ton there. There's 2 main slide complexes, sometimes of which aren't even open. There's a splash area. There used to be a tornado slide there that they took out. Now it's just a grassy field. And then when you cross under Racer 75, that's where you have your wave pool. And it goes pretty far back there. There's a bunch more slides. But it's a very strange design. I really wish that Kings Dominion would just put the entire water park on the far side of Racer 75 and just make that the entrance. I think that makes so much more sense. And just keep all the water park over there, and then you can use this side for more dry park and roller coasters and stuff. It's never gonna happen, but in my opinion, that definitely would have been a better design because they have a ton of room back there. So that should give you an idea of all the different areas of Kings Dominion. And you know, one thing I really want to shout out is just how much the food has gotten better here. So many amusement parks just have boring, tasteless options, but Kings Dominion actually has amazing food. I mean, Grain and Grill right there on International Street might be the best restaurant at a regional theme park. It is so good. I loved what they did there. The other thing that I think has gotten better is the live entertainment, which is constantly changing. So even a year from now, I'm sure that the offerings will be different than what they are now. Their most recent show is Let's Get Wild, which is in Jungle Expedition, which is fantastic. It was very reminiscent of like Festival of the Lion King at Animal Kingdom, which is a huge compliment that a regional theme park is kind of doing their own spin on a Disney show. and it was great. And then when Grand Carnival is going on, the live entertainment just gets taken to the next level when they have a full-on parade every night, tons of walk-around characters. And when you aren't dealing with an intellectual property and you just kind of have to make up your own characters, they've done a really good job. I wish Grand Carnival ran for a lot longer of a time than it currently does, which is a couple weeks, but I get it. It's a special event. It's supposed to entice people to come out for it, but I do highly recommend it. That's for sure. The park gets a lot more lively when that's going on. Which brings us to our seasonal events. Halloween Haunt here is one of my favorite times of year. It's definitely the best Halloween attraction in the state of Virginia. Sorry, Busch Gardens, but Hallow Scream doesn't come anywhere near as close to as good as this one is. They have incredibly detailed haunted houses and scare zones. And the actors, for the most part, do a fantastic job as well. It's just got a really good atmosphere. And then Winterfest likewise is amazing. The lights are stunning, the parade is magical, and they have wintertime characters just roaming the park that you can interact with. And then for New Year's, they actually are open till midnight, and they do a giant party counting down to the new year. But I'll start to wrap things up here. I mean, King's Dominion will always have a soft spot in my heart. I truly love visiting this place, and I'm so proud of all they've done to make the park better. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, King's Dominion didn't have the best reputation, especially when it was coming off after Paramount. A lot of people look down on King's Dominion in favor of Busch Gardens. But when you see what King's Dominion is doing versus what Busch Gardens is doing, I don't even think it comes close. That's why I prefer this place so much more. It's night and day what this park looks like now versus 10 years ago. Each year they make little changes to make the park better. Hopefully one day one of those changes will include an updated front gate. While I love International Street, that front entrance does look a little outdated. And when you see what Cedar Fair did with Cedar Point, Worlds of Fun, and Carowinds, you know how much better it could be. And that's not saying that there has to be a front gate coaster here. I definitely think they could give it a bit more of a modern feel. But I definitely can't recommend King's Dominion enough. Am I biased? I mean, yeah, probably. I have a lot of sentimental attachment to this place. But I've also tried to be objective here. This park definitely is not just for the thrill seekers. If you're bringing the whole family, I promise there is a ton for everyone to do. So let me know down in the comments below, what do you think of King's Dominion? Do you agree with the points that I've brought up? And if you're new to the channel, I'd love if you could subscribe. We do park reviews for places all across the world. So thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time.